Hey there. Here's a new video about how to construct a dress shoulder blade. And these are mostly my own methods I've devised myself, because when I was doing my apprenticeship in the long ago time, my mentor decided not to even bother teaching me these, because they had been popular for about a century and then they'd rapidly fallen out of fashion, so he couldn't be bothered. So, but they've lately come back into fashion. I'm getting more and more orders for the things. So I'm going to show you other kilt makers, because there was somebody a while ago had asked me and slipped my mind and I got busy. Sorry, here we are. First off, I'll start with my own nomenclature. Starting from the top, we have the top band, sewn pretty much as for the kilt. The fell, pleated and sewn as such. The main body of the kilt, and the front fall. And in this case, I've already put the kilt pin, or sorry, the plaid brooch on it. And we can see the front fall, which hangs down the front. There's a placket, as it were, of tartan cloth sewn over the joint between the two to make it look more neat. So now these things aren't one size fits all. It's tempting to do so, but the risk is making these things too long for the individual. So what I do, when the person either has the kilt or is wearing trousers, and I sort of make a note or put a chalk mark to show where the bottom of their kilt would be, I cheat a bit. I have a completed plaid. I'll put the plaid on them with the top of the proper spot and measure how long, just move it up and down until I consider the length to be right, and then make a chalk mark. But I should back up a bit. Original plaids, the officers' plaids worn with full dress uniform, were essentially like this, but they were fastened around the waist with a long cloth belt. And it was an elegant solution, but kind of bulky, because when you bunch up this belt, you're adding this much mass to the waist, a double fist, and so therefore it's not slimming. So my improvement is to take two hooks, and you can see how they're mounted. They're mounted facing away from the individual, and I have a couple of bar tacks, which I've sewn on. So when the thing is mounted in position, it's going to stay in place. It really takes an effort to unhook this thing. It's not going to touch wood unhooked by itself. So when I'm measuring the person, this is a more elegant solution. So when I'm measuring the person, let's imagine this kilt is actually being worn by somebody. I'll arrange the fall of the plaid so that it comes down to at or about the bottom of the kilt, maybe slightly longer, but certainly not as far as the top of the hose. We remember the original belted plaid that these are emulating. The plaid would have been a little bit shorter, so I'm going to go for that. Maybe just a slight break on the lower edge of the kilt. And then again, when I'm measuring the person, I'll just pull it over, this one over the shoulder. And as you can see, I've made a chalk mark for the last customer showing where I marked that to show the top seam. So there we are, the fitting, the nomenclature. And now I'm going to show you how I actually make the thing. I'm just going to put that out of the way for the time being. Now this is the plaid for my current customer. He has decided to pleat the kilt to the white stripe, which I think is a gifted decision, because when he moves, he's going to get a dark flash as he walks. It's going to look very striking. So my first step, I've measured this to length. In his case, it's exactly 2 yards. Now, when I'm ordering cloth for these things, for what I'm going to say an average height person, i.e. somebody as tall as me, 5'8"-ish, I'm going to budget 2.5 yards of cloth. If we have an exceptionally tall person, we might go for an extra yard. But I started with 2 yards of cloth, 2.5 yards of cloth. So this piece is 2 yards long. At the top end, I've loosely folded it, pleated it into position, and it's as wide as it is here. Generally, I want it to be at about 1/4 to 1/3 of the total pleated part of the kilt. And I've made it rather wide in this case because I want to keep this as thin as possible. I don't want it to be too thick, because we don't want to create an unsightly bulge under the coat. So I've folded it, pinned it. Now I've basted it up. Now the sewn portion is just going to be 2 rows of back stitch and the edge on each side sewn down with a fell stitch, but I'm going to press down to here. Okay, so having pressed it, having sewn this, I'm going to put a top band on in the same manner that we do a kilt, and we can see that manner in my other videos. And then at the top edge, I should back up that I've left two vestigial reminders, I guess, of the earlier style where were this kilt to be fringed on three sides, the fringe would be there. But this is a piece of single width cloth, of 27-inch wide cloth, and I'm keeping to that original, I guess, the original style of maintaining the selvage edge. Now the bottom edge, or the top edge I should say, I fringed it out for a couple of inches, and to this I'm going to attach the front fall. Now the fall, of course, hangs down from the shoulder, and I've made it about 18 inches because this is an indulgence. This is a very formal indulgence. So I'm not going to pleat this, I'm not going to press this, and I've made it rather longer so it's fuller and it's more voluptuous, I imagine would be the word. So what I've done there is I've taken a piece of cloth, I've laid a straight edge along the line so that I'm bisecting the tartan. It's right on the bias. I marked that with clay chalk because I'm not going to be pressing it out later. And then having measured, sorry, my tape measure just fell down. Only does that when people are watching. I'll measure the piece 18 inches. So I'm going to measure past that. I'm going to cut there. So I'm going to rip there. I'm going to rip there. So there's my piece. I fringe the edges out as we've seen here. And then I sort of fold it. And it's like, if you can imagine such a thing, rolling your own cigarettes. I haven't thought of any hard and fast rules or principles. This is strictly to taste, right? And frankly, even after years and years of making these things, I will fiddle with these a few times until I get it right. I can't, it's a matter of pleating it up and going, yeah, I kind of like the look of that, or alternately, I think I can do better than that, until we get it. Now, so the effect is, now I could press this, and I have pressed them in the past, and if this was going to a soldier, he would almost certainly press it the moment my back was turned. But what I'm going to do is I'm going to fasten these with a back stitch, a long back stitch down there to hold them in position, but without pressing them. And then at the top, it'll be fastened again about here, and then a placket will be cut out of an extra piece of cloth and sewn over as we saw. So I'll wrap up this video in a few minutes. There'll be a short video after this where I show you how the complete plaid looks. One other aside, you'll see this recurring feature of what has been described as the St. Andrew's cross, but it's, I think, more properly called a saltire or saltier, which is which has been an element of Scottish and Highland Scottish iconography since well before Roman times. We see it on standing stones and such. So I think it's coincidental that St. Andrew became the patron saint of Scotland. I mean, he lived and died in what is now Greece, for heaven's sake, and I don't think I would be surprised if he'd been able to find Scotland on the map, and I think he'd probably be appalled if he'd been dropped down in the middle of it. It's a coincidence of his cross matching the saltire. So there we are, with the saltire falling down the front, loosely gathered, not pressed, stitched together. So I'm going to carry on with that, and I'll see you for a second episode where you see the complete plaid. Thank you.